Hey everyone, today we are going to be making some artisan bread. It is basically a bread that you use, make a Poolish, and then that sits for about 10 to 12 hours, and then you can make it up with the rest of your main ingredients. So first thing we'll be doing today is making our Poolish, which is a pre-ferment basically. Gives the bread a really good flavor. But we'll mix that up first and let that sit for about 10 to 12 hours, and then we'll finish making the bread. The ingredients for the Poolish, it's a 1-to-1 ratio of water and flour. I use white flour. I do a double batch, so it's 1,000 grams of water, 1,000 grams of white flour, and then 1/8 of a teaspoon of yeast. And then also the water needs to be at 85 degrees Fahrenheit for it to be a real slow acting process. So we'll mix that up and show you how it's all done. So we'll turn on our scale here, have it set for grams, have the mixing container. I use a 6-quart container for my Poolish, but have the scale zeroed out, and it's at 0 grams. And now I'll get my flour, 1,000 grams of flour. Just going to take my container off here. Makes it a little bit easier being by the flour tub. Make a little bit less of a mess when I'm doing this. So we'll get the 1,000 grams of flour. That should be pretty close. And this is a very wet dough. So oftentimes I'll add an extra maybe 20 grams of flour. So I do about 1,020 for the flour, and then 1,000 grams of water. After you have the flour added, you're going to add your 1/8 teaspoon of yeast. Then usually I'll mix it up a little bit. Just to get the yeast kind of mixed in nicely. That's done. And then we have our 85 degree Fahrenheit water. Zero out the scale, we're at 0. Add 1,000 grams of water, that is 85 degrees. There we are, 1,000 grams. So once we do that, just mix it all together. Like I said, very wet dough. Even when you make your final bread, it's a very wet consistency. It's very sticky. I'm out of flax seed at the moment. Oftentimes, so I'll substitute 50 grams or so of flax seed in the Poolish for 50 grams of the white flour. Just adds a little bit of flavor to the bread. So get this all mixed up here. And you can see it's really wet and sloppy. Scrape off the sides a little bit. Make sure I got all the dry flour off. And give it a quick little mix again. And we will be all good. So that's it. Now, I'm just going to keep it in a warm place here for a while. Like I said, about 10 to 12 hours. Put this lid on it, and it will be good to go. See you in about 12 hours. Alright, we are all set with the Poolish. That's what it kind of looks like when it's ready to go. And we are going to mix up our dry ingredients for the second part of the bread mix. We're going to use 1,000 grams of flour, 500 grams of water, temperature of 106 degrees Fahrenheit, 48 grams of salt, and 2 teaspoons of yeast. So I got the flour all set to go there. I did add some flaxseed to it. I usually add some ground flaxseed. So what I did for this is about 950 grams of flour, 50 grams of flaxseed. So it still came out to 1,000 grams of flour, or your dry mix. And then again, 500 grams of water at 106 degrees. So what we'll do now, add the 48 grams of salt. Two teaspoons of yeast, which ends up being about 8 grams. And this is the yeast that I use. It's like a bread machine yeast. You can probably use the other stuff, but this is what I've had the most success with. And we will just mix this all together with a spoon so all the dry ingredients are mixed. And then basically what we do is we keep the dry ingredients separate, and then we add the 500 grams of water to the Poolish, which we will do in just a second. So again, mix up the dry ingredients, get the yeast and the salt kind of evenly dispersed in here. Makes it a lot easier to mix things when you have the water added in later on. So here we go. Everything is mixed well enough. Next step, we'll be adding water to the Poolish. Alright, so the next step, we have our water heated at 106 degrees. Have the Poolish on the scale. Scale is zeroed out, and just kind of pour it around the edges. We're going to add 500 grams of water to our Poolish. Just watch the scale as you're doing this. Definitely don't want to add too much water, or this will be even more of a wet dough than it currently is. Alright, so there we have our 500 grams of water. Take this off the scale, get the dry ingredients over here, and then we just dump it on in. Have my spatula handy so I can scrape this out. Don't want to waste anything. That looks pretty good. And now basically we just mix this up. And to save some time so you don't have to watch me doing this for a long time, I'm going to cut the camera and I will show you the results once it's all mixed in. Alright, so I have this pretty well mixed up. You can see kind of the consistency of it here. But everything is good and mixed. So now what we do, we will let it sit here, put the lid on, let it rest for about 12 minutes, and then we will come back and give this bread 3 folds, which I will show you when that time comes. So put the lid on, set the timer for 10 to 12 minutes, and just let it sit. Alright, it's been about 12 minutes. Take the lid off. Make sure your hand is good and wet. It'll help the dough not to stick. And then just kind of go work around the sides and just flip the dough over on itself. And that's pretty much all you do to fold it. Like I said, we'll do this a total of 3 times. Get the dough off that I can. Alright, good to go. lid back on, let it sit for about another 12 minutes, and we'll fold it again. All right, here we go for fold number 2. Lid back on, set the timer for another 10 to 12 minutes, and then we'll come back for our final fold. All right, time for the final fold. Third and final. As you can see, it kind of gets a little bit less sticky and sloppy the more times you fold it, and that's why I fold this recipe 3 times. You can do it 2, but I just find it better to do 3. So now what we're going to do is let this sit here for roughly about 3 hours. You're going to want it to triple in size, so I use a 12-quart container here. It's at the 4-quart line right now. When it's ready to go, pretty much gets to the top of this container. This is really something that is determined by the temperature in the house, temperature outside. If it's the middle of the summer, it's really hot, you're not running air conditioning, this can raise in about 2 hours or so, sometimes a little bit quicker. Same thing when it's cold in the wintertime. If the house temperature is cooler, chances are this is going to take maybe 4 hours to rise. So keep an eye on it. You want it to be triple the volume, triple the size when you get ready to divide it into loaves. So we'll see you in about 3 hours for the dividing and separating of the bread. So our bread has tripled in size, so we will get things ready to go. I have my proofing baskets here, which I will lightly dust with flour. If you don't have proofing baskets and you're wondering if you can still do this, you can. You just need a bowl about this size and just dust it with flour just so the dough doesn't stick too badly, and that's pretty much all you need. Then after this, we'll get some flour on the countertop here and then dump out our dough. So we're going to take our dough and just kind of get it out here, one big blob onto the counter. And once we do this, we will divide it into loaves and get it into the proofing basket. Alright, so now we're going to divide this into 4 parts. Let's have my little flour sprinkler here. And that's good to go. Get some of the excess flour from the side. Got my handy little cutter here. Alright. Then flop the sides over themselves. And kind of flip it over. I use a little pastry brush here just to help get some of the flour off. Give it a little bit of traction for when I'm forming the loaves. Good to go there. And the more clean you can have the countertop for this, the better, because the flour just makes the little loaf of bread slide too much, and it really makes it hard to form. So basically all you want to do is take your hands using your pinkies underneath of it and just kind of pull it along until you get it formed into a nice little tight round loaf. Now basically your fingers slide underneath and just kind of use your friction to pull it towards you. And this looks like a pretty happy little round loaf. And then we'll get some flour on our fingers and transfer it over to the proofing basket. And we do that for each one of them. So I'll stop recording now so you don't have to watch me do all of them. So the next thing we do once we have all the loaves formed properly and in their happy little proofing baskets, we gently dust the top with flour. Again, just to help prevent your towel from sticking to anything. So once we do this, we will put the towels on them. When you're doing a double loaf like this, I have 2 Dutch ovens so I can make 2 loaves at the same time. We're going to let them sit on the counter for about 25 minutes, and then we're going to take 2 of these that are covered and put them in the refrigerator. They can stay there while the other ones are baking. That helps prevent them from over-rising and the yeast kind of deadening, and then you get more of a flatbread. So cover these up. While we're covering these up, next thing we're going to do is go over to the oven where I have my Dutch ovens already inside of it. 2 cast iron Dutch ovens. Preheat the oven to 465 degrees. And again, we're going to set the timer for 25 minutes. And once that timer goes off, we will take these 2 loaves, put them in the refrigerator, give it another 5 minutes for these to complete their proofing process, and then we will take the Dutch ovens out of the oven and put the loaves of bread in there. So for now, that's all. We'll see you in 25 minutes when these are ready to go in the refrigerator. Alright, 25 minutes are up, so we're going to take our 2 loaves that we're not going to bake right away and throw them into the refrigerator. And that is where they will stay until the first 2 loaves there are baked. So, into the fridge they go. Set the timer for another 5 minutes, and then at that time we'll be at 30 minutes, and then these will be ready to go into the Dutch ovens. So it's been 30 minutes. Oven's nice and preheated. Dutch ovens have had plenty of time as well to heat up. Make sure you have your oven gloves on. I have almost grabbed these without a glove before, and that's not a good thing. A little bit of smoke. That's alright. That's why we don't have smoke detectors in the kitchen. Unsheath the bread. Gently dump it onto the countertop. I just use my little pastry brush here again just to dust off some of the excess flour. If you don't want to, you don't have to. Totally up to you, but I find it a little bit nicer just to dust off flour, make things a little bit more clean, less dusty powder after a while to deal with. So here we go. Pretty good to go. And then just gently pick it up and set it into the pan. And for any of you who are watching who have made bread in the past, you might be wondering, when do you get to punch this bread? Well, unfortunately, this is a bread you do not punch. The whole purpose of doing everything the way that we're doing it is to keep a very airy, fluffy, tasteful bread. By punching the dough, you get rid of a lot of the air bubbles, the gas, and for this you don't want to do that. So we'll show you the finished results and let you see some of those nice pockets of air when we're all done here. But for now, we will put this last little loaf in the Dutch oven and very carefully put the lids back on. Put the other oven mitt on, and we will throw these in the oven and set the timer for 30 minutes. And once that's done, we will open up the oven door and take the lids off. So we'll see you in about 30 minutes. So this next step we're going to do here, we will take the lids off the Dutch ovens, and I typically will set the timer for another 5 minutes and let it finish baking. Some people like more of a dark slash burnt type bread. You can keep the lids off for 10, 12 minutes, 15 minutes. It's all up to you as far as your personal taste goes. Like I said, I like my bread being pretty golden brown, and that's about 5 minutes with the lids off. So we will do that right now. All right, 5 minutes up. Carefully take the lids off. Burn my arms very many times, but we'll set the alarm time for 5 minutes and take the bread out at that point. So the timer just went off, our 5 minutes is up, and we will take the Dutch ovens out and then remove the bread from them. Put them on a cooling rack. And this is your finished product. Pretty nice looking bread. So, if you only made half of the recipe, you were all done. You can put your lids back on and wrap things up. If you're like me and you have another 2 loaves to bake, at this point, we take the Dutch ovens, put them back in the oven with the lids on, and then we go over to the refrigerator, take out our 2 loaves that are covered and have been slowly proofing, put them on the counter, set the timer for 5 minutes. When that timer goes off, the Dutch ovens will have heated up again enough. The bread that was in the refrigerator will have warmed up a little bit more, and it will be ready to go in. So I'll do that step, but I'm not going to show it for this video because you guys have seen the whole process. So hopefully this helped you out. Hopefully you get to try the bread and enjoy it. I will cut a piece after about 15 minutes. You need to wait 15 minutes to let the bread cool off a little bit, otherwise you can have some issues. So if you're excited to try it, wait at least 15 minutes to cut it, and then enjoy some nice hot bread with some butter. Alright, now we have waited patiently for 15 minutes. We will cut a piece of this bread and have some with butter. And that's why you don't punch the bread. You want those nice happy air bubbles in there. Gives it a real nice, light, fluffy, airy bite. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed this bread. And if you liked it and it helped you, please give it a thumbs up, a like, subscribe if you want. I will be doing more baking recipes in the future. Have a good night, everyone.